So you can see my painting area here. Got the photograph. I'll talk about the materials I'll be using for this demonstration in a short while. Those of you that have seen me before, nothing much new there. But this is the old mill building. This is one of my photographs taken maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And this is a lovely building. You just here, you come up some steps and you go into this building. Lots of light coming in from some side windows, mainly these windows here. And then there's a sort of doorway there with lots of light coming in through that. But quite a charming scene to paint in watercolor. Many people might just glance at this and think, well, not going to bother painting that. But I think it's quite interesting. It's got lots of objects in there. It's an exercise in perspective. It's an exercise in values, edges as well. I mean, watercolor is all about edges. So look at, for example, look at that hard edge there, just the edge of the doorway. Softer bits of light, softer edges around here, a hard edge here as well. So we need to look at this scene for a few minutes and just sort of take it all in and think how we're going to approach it in watercolor. Think about the main objects. Think about things that you will not bother including, things that you will include, maybe things that you might move around to help the composition. I think this photograph is pretty much there as regards to composition. I probably wouldn't change too much about it. Maybe if my photograph saw more of this side window, that might be a little bit of a help. So that doorway there was a little bit more to the right. So I'm thinking about the balance of it. And then I'm thinking about what the focal point might be. Well, maybe it's sort of there. You know, we're looking at that doorway. Then it's an exercise in perspective. So look at the main angles we've got. So, excuse me, we've got the top left there, bottom left there. That's almost like a 45-degree angle. Because we're not in the middle of the room, then the right-hand side is slightly shallower. So the top right might be there. The base of the wall on the right-hand side is sort of hidden with those objects, this millstone and this dividing wall. But it's going to be somewhere around about there. Then in the middle, we've got this low wall. Think of it like a low wall. I'm sure it's just there for health and safety to keep people away from these moving parts and dangerous equipment. So that angle there, well, obviously this wall's got two sides, so narrower here, getting a little bit wider here. Then these oval shapes, this is the trickiest one to do, getting that one right. All right, how are you at elliptical shapes? All right, and then that inner one there. Well, there's this outer rim and then the inner part of it. Slightly easier with this further one here. There's a couple, oh, there's a third one up there. So 1, 2, 3 of these. I'm not sure if they're stones, but they're a similar sort of circular object. Then above those, we've got a sort of hopper, if I could describe it. Bill knows all the, well, maybe Lewis knows all the terms of the bits of equipment here, what function they.
Hopper's good. Hopper's a good.
Hopper's good, but it's like a, well, it's like a you know, it's just a basic sort of pipeline or a wider opening at the top, fairly sort of squarish shape, coming down to a tapered end. And similarly, you almost miss that one in the background. It's sort of, you know, if you only looked at this photograph for about 30 seconds, you wouldn't know that was there. You just pick up that one there. So quite dark. Again, as you look around, try and see, get in your own mind, where are the darker areas and where are the lighter areas? So that is really dark there. really dark here, dark down here in the bottom right corner, dark just behind the doorway, dark above here. Now look at the colors. What colors do you see? It's not, wait, initially you think, well, oh, it's brown or it's gray, but look more closely. There's a little bit of blue up here with this unit or something up there. We can see a little bit of blue maybe on the top of this millstone here, a little bit of blue, a cool blue on the floor. Getting warmer on the left-hand side. There's pinks in here, rosy pinks, a bit of orange up here, red on these beams, all right? And then think about texture, smooth surfaces, this brick flooring here, and we can just see some areas of smooth. In some areas, we can just see a little bit of the joints, a bit of sort of mortar between the bricks on the floor, a little bit of damage there, and so on. The top of this millstone, sort of pitted, little tiny dents in it where the light is catching the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, there's a little bit of shadow. Likewise up here, look at this lovely wall. Hopefully this has not been plastered over.
No, it's definitely not been plastered this year.
No. What's actually changed here, Lewis? You've got some new equipment in here, or is this pretty much?
We've got more of a museum down the left-hand side.
Oh, here.
So we've preserved all the sort of old bits, bolts, and things that were used in the mill. So it's much the same, but more. Yeah.
Can't wait to see it. So there's a supporting bit of ironwork here, an arm sort of brace there. I guess that might be holding up the ceiling, perhaps. Is this a fridge or freezer or something over here?
I'm afraid it's a freezer.
Yeah, it's just an object. There's a dustbin there, old tub of paint, some squarish objects. Now, there are some smaller details that you may not want to include on this. There is this rather difficult wheel here with the curved spokes, quite tricky to do. You might want to include that if you're brave at the end of the room. There might be another focal point leading your eye to that. There is another one here. I personally wouldn't bother with that. And the more you look at this, the more details you pick up, like these conduits for the power, little something hanging off the wall there. This arm here that I guess you sort of turn in some way, or this supporting brace here going across the beams. Little details like that you may or may not include, but just think about those angles. This is a painting that if you don't get the drawing right, it's all going to fail miserably. All right. So we've got to get the drawing right before we, in my opinion, get the drawing right before we start painting, and get those angles right and the placement of the objects. And when we look at these objects, just try and get a reference point. For example, this doorway, the level of that third one there is almost halfway down there. This dividing wall here is in line with the bottom of the window. Just get one reference point, and then everything follows suit. And it sort of hopefully gels together. Right, so that's my little summary of the subject for this demonstration. Let me just go through my materials, and then we'll just stop to see if there's any questions before I start with the outline drawing, which is my first step, really, drawing with my soft pencil. Right, paper for this demonstration is Saunders Waterford, but to be honest with you, any decent watercolor paper will do. Stick with paper that you know. and try and get the best quality paper that you can get. This is cold press, and it's 15 inches by, I think most of us here will understand imperial. Sorry for our Danish friends. By 15 inches by 11 inches, taped down with masking tape. All right, it will buckle a little bit, I don't mind. Brushes, I'm going to be using 3 brushes for this demonstration. A large mop brush. This is a Raphael mop brush with a good edge to it. Do you see that edge? If I just tilt it a little bit, quite a good edge. Great for painting around things, being a little bit more precise and good. It holds a lot of paint. Then medium-sized mop brush. This is a squirrel mop brush, again, with a good point and a good edge to it, and fairly good water retaining capabilities. And then a small little synthetic brush, could be anything, just for doing smaller details, finishing off the painting just with some finer details. Paints, mainly Winsor and Newton. I try and get the best quality paints I can afford, but I've got neutral tint here. I may not be using all of these, but I will try and describe them as I mix them. Neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, probably using a lot of that today, you know, bearing in mind the theme of the colors there. Yellow ochre, viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, the blues we will use, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, Windsor red, light red, cadmium orange, and a lemon yellow it's been contaminated. I was doing some foliage the other day. Sometimes I mix actually in the pans here, so it might look a little bit messy. And the palette isn't ultra clean, but it can sometimes introduce some interesting initial color for my wash on the next painting I do. Over the top right corner off shot is my water container. Bottom right corner is a sponge. If you see my brush go that way, I'm most likely picking up a little bit of water, and down the bottom right hand corner of the sponge, just to remove any excess moisture off that. Okay, so that's the paper, paints and brushes. Hopefully I won't be needing to use one of these, my eraser, who knows. So the initial drawing and making that first mark, always the most important mark to make. Where do you start doing the drawing? Well, it could be the focal point, the doorway, for example, the dustbin. For me, I'm going to get those angles right that I started with. Just to recap, getting that right, trying to think how many degrees is that off the vertical or horizontal, or think of it like the hours of a clock, you know, so is that kind of 4 o'clock, and that's more like I don't know, 1:30, if you see what I mean. All right, so, and I'm going to just stand up. I was sat down. Let me just stand up a second, and I always find it easier to stand up and look down at where I'm going. Now, if these pencil marks don't show through, sometimes I find on Zoom you can't really see the pencil marks too clearly. I will try and emphasize them before I start painting, just so that you can see them more clearly. All right, so don't worry if I drag my pencil across the page and you think, where is that line? It might be the resolution on Zoom. Okay, so that angle there, something like that. And then the far left corner of the room comes down there. And our doorway is there. The top of the door is pretty much horizontal. Then the left-hand side of the door, hard edge, Right-hand side of the door, down to about there. Fridge here, but it can be anything. A little bit of a tricky object to do there. Actually, I'm just looking at my screen. The drawing looks like it's sort of coming through. Just see if I can adjust my lighting a little bit here. There we go. Back on the fridge. Bottom of the fridge, quite an easy object to do, but this angle here will be a little bit steeper than that one. Can't really see too much to the front of the fridge. Now, behind the fridge, the wall, the bottom of the wall comes out like here, and there's some planks of wood and whatnot here. Okay. Oh, I can hear someone's pencil busy with it. Right, window ledge. I'm over here now, this window ledge. That's catching a little bit of light there. Nice bit of light just there. Not sure what material this is, whether it's, this looks like brick to me, but anyway, just think of the color and the value, but quite light there, light hitting the window ledge. But let's get it in. Again, I'm using my doorway as a reference, and the window ledge is almost sort of halfway down the door. So it comes out a bit like that above the fridge, and we've got a slither of light hitting the window ledge there, and then the right-hand side of the window and the top of the window. So that's going to be quite like there. Now, the back wall, let me just refer to the photograph. It does, whereas the top of the door is horizontal, I think these beams go down ever so slightly. So I'm going to be true to the photograph, come down a little bit. It makes it a bit more quirky that we've got some funny angles in there, and not all horizontal and vertical. You know, there's just a little bit of a quirkiness, and make it a little bit sort of oldie worldy, so to speak. Now, I need to make sure, yeah, that's about right there. So we'll come down just ever so slightly to around about there, that point on my page, which is the top right corner of the room. Sorry to keep going back, but that's there, all right? So just slightly right of center. And that's going to give us enough room for all these lovely objects on the right-hand side. So another important junction, another important point to get to in our drawing. Angle of the roof going up on the right-hand side is sort of like that. It's almost nearly 2 o'clock. If we think about the hours of a clock, almost 2 o'clock. Over to there. Obviously, there's some beams going across as well. I'll do that in a minute. I just want to get these main outlines correct. Coming down from the middle of the beams, there's a support. It's almost like it's sort of jacking up the ceiling. There must be some kind of a support in there, almost halfway between the two sides, around about there. I'll just draw that as a line for now. And we come down to about there, sort of a third of the way down from that door. All right, and there's lots of sort of objects in here. There's a little bit of a ledge catching the light there. And now I'm going to draw this little low wall here. Now we do need to get this right with the perspective. So now, obviously narrow here, wider down here. It's almost three times the width. All right, so it does sort of widen out towards the foreground. First, get one of those edges right. Let's start about here for this one, and we're sort of coming down to about this area here. I could cheat and get the ruler out, drawing a line from there to there, but I'm going to do it freehand. And it's quite we can't really see this edge too much in places. Where the light's coming in from the doorway, we can't actually see this too much. It becomes clearer down towards the foreground. So let's just, I'll draw this in fairly light. First of all, you might almost see it on camera. Actually, just make it a bit harder down there. And now the tricky one, getting this perspective right. So let's start off with the width that we want and coming a little bit wider down to there. Doesn't need to be perfectly straight because it's an old building. It's got little quirks about it and bits of the stone. I think this is a brick wall, bits of stonework chipped out over the years. Right. Base of the bottom of the door is around about there, but there's sort of objects here, just between the fridge and the doorway. At the back of the building, there's, well, it's a silver dustbin, an aluminium dustbin here. But it could be anything. This is some sort of cylindrical object. There's that wheel. Are you going to take up the challenge of drawing that wheel? How are you at drawing complete circles? There we are. There's a wheel. Good practice for if you're doing any bicycles in a landscape. And then the inside of that wheel, the middle. And you can make these spokes straight if you want to make it easier, or that kind of curve if you want to. How many spokes are there? 6, not too difficult. There we are. Oh, I'll go for 5. Evens it out a bit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, that's the wheel. Bit too much detail at this stage, but just wanted to get that correct. There's another tub of paint here. I assume it's paint or maybe some sort of construction material, but it's just an object in there. Right, this wall, let's just get the height of the wall correct, something like that. We really can't see the base of this wall because of these. No, Lois, what are these called here? These wheels here. Do you know what these do?
I've no idea what they were called, but they opened the turbine underneath.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Which would start up this. So this one for this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, they're pretty tricky objects to do. Just see how you get on with those. And they're sort of hiding the base of the wall at the top here. But I'll just get in first of all where I think the base of the wall is. And again, it's coming wider down towards us. That's almost vertical, that line. Not quite, but almost. But with the values, we can't, the value here is the same as the value here. All right. There's just an ever so faint line where we can see the bottom. Now the tricky bits, these objects on the right hand side. Let's get in. I'm going to get in the. Let's do the window first of all on this right hand side, and the inner part of the window, top of it like that, comes down to about there. We've got around about here the start of this. It looks like wood to me. It's some sort of division between these compartments, and the top of this division, it goes up slightly. All right. We're all going to be architects after this. It could drive you mad, all these angles, but you've got to get them right. So we're going to go slightly uphill here. So that vertical, slightly uphill at that sort of angle up to just before the opening of the window. The bottom ledge goes down slightly, very light on the windowsill, and then the dark frame of the window. Bit of an arch at the top. Not sure if there's glazing on this window. I guess there is some form of some glass.
There is glass now, yes. Yeah.
Okay. See, it's all gone up market. There'll be bedrooms soon in this place.
Don't tempt us.
Be a lovely place to stay the night. Right, there's my window frame. Dark edge down here, actually very dark down there. Dark there compared to very light. Dark, light. Right-hand side of that dividing wall, just catching a little bit of light there as well. So this millstone, another tricky object to get right. It's actually probably, apart from the angles, this is probably the trickiest thing to get right. And I think my photograph might have made it not like a true elliptical shape. It's slightly out. So let me just freehand here, try and lightly draw in the shape. Like the photograph, I'll not have the right-hand side showing. There we are, something like that. And then in the middle, well, it's more towards the top, but certainly if you're looking down, it would be in the middle. We've got a sort of, I guess it's the hole Sorry if there's any millers or architectural experts listening. I don't know what the term is for that hole, but again, we've got to get it right, and that's going to be dark. I'll just cross hatch that in. That's going to be really dark. Side of this stone, vertical, the bottom of the dividing wall is parallel to that, so that would be okay. Very dark there, and it's almost, we'll do a graded wash here. It's quite light there, but it gets darker. So start looking at these values. Bit of shadow coming across here, soft edge, and there's a sort of rim around the just get that right, and the bottom of that millstone. There we go. Now going further up the room, we have the second one with the hopper on top, and then we'll draw the window behind that. So the left hand side is there. The top is a little bit like that. I'll draw the curve in a minute, and then the right hand side goes down there. There's a sort of supporting piece around the middle, but just in that corner is very dark. So when I've got my lines right, I can just do a little bit of cross hatching just to give me a mental note to say that's going to be dark. Now hopper above this, and that hopper, the top of the hopper is almost in line with the door. So pretty much if we got that door in the right position, then relatively we can then position everything else a little bit more easily. So in line with that, and then we've got that top support. I'm not bothered doing that twisty arm. I'm just going to get this shape right. And that's the right hand side. Goes slightly at an angle there. The left hand side of it like that, and there we are. And that will be dark as well. Window behind, it's sort of in line with this. It's got a little bit of an arch to it, and it's about there. There's some sort of support for that hopper going to the wall, and try and make that vertical, that side. So that's light. That's that second window up on the right hand side. We're nearly there with the drawing, just a little bit more to do. Let's just get right that upright, and then there's a sort of side arm coming out over there, and there's sort of another hopper in the background there, but we can't really see it, and there's another cylindrical object further up. Right, we'll just strengthen up some of these lines so that you can, is it actually appearing okay there, Lois? Well, there's a bit of a shadow coming over.
Pencil's coming out quite well, yeah.
There we are. Let's just make some of these lines a little bit darker for you. That ceiling, I'm looking at the camera now. That's pretty much all right. That side there, doorway, little bit of a light to the top of the arch of that window. It's a little bit lower than that one. Beams going across the ceiling. They're sort of closer together, and then as they come up, a little bit wider apart, but something like that. And we'll worry about the actual ends of them when we come to the painting. I'm not actually drawing the lines of shadows to make sure that the pencil lines don't show through, but I think I'm nearly there with my initial drawing. So just make sure I've got all these right. I think it looks okay. There's some supports for that wall. There are these wheels, these handles that control the power to those. So there's one there, one around about here. And then another one around about there. Right, I think I've completed my drawing now. Got as much detail in as I want to. So my next step will be, of course, to start painting, getting an initial wash, covering most of the paper, apart from those areas that I want to be quite light. Maybe that window there, a little bit of light here, a little bit of light up there. Actually, let me just rub out top of that window opening. So Lois, are there any questions at all that you can see? Or anyone can unmute their microphone.
Can you talk about the angles and perspective of the arched windows, please?
Yeah, they're not too, I suppose the only one we can see quite a lot of is that arch there, and it sort of goes up at a shallower angle and then comes down at a steeper angle. You've got to imagine that the dividing, the middle of the window is going to be around about there. So that distance will be narrower, will be shorter than that distance. So you could think of it in two halves and then try and get that gentle curve in. But the easiest thing is to draw it in lightly, first of all. It's a bit like the arches of a bridge. You know, if you're looking down a bridge and we've got lots of arches, that would be a more extreme exercise in doing this. So just maybe think about that middle line and think, well, furthest away is going to be narrower than the half that's facing us. Not too difficult with these. There's a tiny bit of an arch there, tiny bit of a slice here. It's almost like a pizza slice, that. Yeah, not too difficult. And then we've just got these. This is the most difficult one here, honestly. That one there. Does that answer your question, whoever asked that?
That was Wendy. She says yes.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I see that. Okay, thanks very much indeed.
There's a question that somebody asked about colours before you start talking about colours. Whether she's got cobalt, cerulean blue. Will that be good?
Yeah, cobalt blue and cerulean blue. Yeah, that'll do. It's mostly, we might be using it a little bit down here to get this sort of cooler stone here, and a little bit here. But most of it's going to be warmer tones, burnt sienna, browns, a little bit of red, maybe a bit of alizarin crimson down here, or some sort of rosy color if you've got that, pinkish color. Or it might go a little bit cooler here, a little bit blue there, and then lighter and pinker, and then more of a sort of orangey brown, and then it goes red again. So yes, it's lovely colors, just in that floor alone. We'll have to include this on the painting itinerary at the watermill.
Now you've got your angles. No reason to ignore it.
No. The only problem with this is trying to get a dozen of us in here. Where would you all be? It might be right that there's just one or two of you, but well, that's the benefit of an online session like this. We can all have the same view. Right, painting then. No more questions. So make sure my hairs are all pointing the right way. So first brush, my big mop brush, but any brush that's quite big, got a good edge to it and a good point. And we're just going to have a bit of fun here, just covering the paper. Apart from those here that we want to keep quite light. So and I always kick myself, but I sometimes paint over in my speed. I sometimes paint over those areas that I do want to keep quite light. So there are some lighter bits here, tops of the stones, maybe the top there, window ledge, this area here behind the fridge. Try and keep those light. So I've dipped my brush in the water and let's pick up a bit of burnt sienna. I think I'll generally work from top to bottom on this. Now this won't be the end color. I'm just covering the paper here, but thinking about the underlying colors and trying to get in the range of colors that I've pointed out, the pinks, the oranges, the blues. So, and you don't need to have, you could put the blues up in the ceiling if you want to. Have blue down over here rather than the oranges, up to you. I think it just makes it a little bit more interesting. So I picked up a little bit of ultramarine blue there, just to cool things down. We will be going over this again, just to cover things up. Burnt sienna. Pick up a bit of alizarin crimson. And what I'm doing here will go a lot lighter as well. So don't worry if you think you've gone a bit too dark. Things will go lighter. So wall here, let's go down, get that good edge. We'll be going over that again. Fridge. pick up a bit of cadmium orange, bit of red. That window opening. Dab a bit in the ceiling. All right. Come down. I'll paint around that dustbin at the end. Now, where I'm painting, it's not ultra dry, the humidity. I know some of you in various parts of the world, some people on a previous workshop we were doing in America or Canada, they're saying that in where they were, the relative humidity was sort of 10 or 20%, so things dry a lot quicker. So don't worry if it dries too quickly, but just try and work as quickly as you can to get this softness. Fridge is going to be quite cool. Let's pick up a bit of cobalt here. So cooler here. We will go over this again. A little bit of pink and then orange. Try and get a soft edge on this doorway. And continue over. Bit of alizarin crimson. Bit of blue for the floor. It's a lot cooler in there. And see if I can get that light edge to the top of that wall. And with that millstone, it's quite light there, but a little bit darker on the right-hand side. We're going a little bit warmer, pinker with the wall there. Burnt sienna, alizarin crimson. Continue on down. We're nearly there with this first wash. This is where it's good to have a good point to your brush, a good edge. There. Now, just before it dries, with the same brush, I'll just squeeze out some of the moisture on the brush, and I'll just do a little bit of lifting out, just to, this is still moist now. You might be able to see it slightly shiny there, but I'll just lift out that edge there, and maybe a little bit there where the light's coming in. Where else can I? No, I think that's right. That just there. I need to get that quite light there. We'll go a bit darker behind. As I say, this is just the initial base color, so we will go in a lot darker as the next step. Now, just as that's drying, what you could do just before this top dries, you could splatter some clear water into there, or a little toothbrush or something like that. Now, timing is very important here. If you do it too soon, you won't get the effect. If it's dried too much, you won't get those little pot marks appearing. So I just need to, it just sort of is in that transformation from, it just sort of turning from that moist stage to a damp stage, and you just about can't see that shine anymore. And you can then do a little bit of splattering, maybe with a small synthetic brush, pick up some clear water and just tap that against your finger, or tap your finger against the brush. And that should just give us a few little don't worry if it goes somewhere else. There we are, a few little marks appearing. On the top. Right, so that's the initial wash done. Are there any questions at all?
No, someone's asking about how they can get hold of the photo, but I'll just answer to her direct.
Okay, all right. Just softening out this edge here, where it dried a little bit too much. So just with a synthetic brush, just softening up that edge. Okay, I'm going to get out my hairdryer now just to speed up this process. The next step will be to layer on now my darks, my shadows, and trying to get more of the soft edges appearing as well. And we need to do a little bit of negative painting around some objects as well. The wheel in particular at the end there. Right, I'm just going to get out my hairdryer, so excuse me. I think that's dry now. I wanted to make sure this is totally dry before I go on to the next stage. And if the paper was buckling a little bit, it's now gone a lot flatter, makes it easier to work on. So nice and dry. And next step, we're adding in more darks, and just to give it more depth, to give it more interest. For this, I'm going to be using a slightly smaller mop brush, but again, it's got a good point to it, a good edge as well, which I'll need. I need to be slightly more careful with the painting here, and I'll be holding the brush, whereas before I was probably holding the brush at the end. I'm going to be a little bit more precise now, a bit more careful with my painting. Okay, right. Were there any questions there, Lois, before I start?
No, they seem to be fine. Someone was just asking if they could have a bit of time, but I see that she's catching up now, so because I saw her use her hairdryer, so that's okay.
Okay, well, that was a bit of quick catching up there. So I'll start with, let's start with the beams on the top. So a little bit of burnt sienna, bit of cobalt, and that one there. Then the next one down might be a little bit redder. Then let's go browner. A little bit of blue, cobalt blue, burnt sienna. And a little bit darker, the furthest one, so ultramarine blue, a little bit of neutral tint. There we are. We might tidy this up a little bit with a smaller brush later on. Now, this left-hand wall, quite dark here, very dark. Let's go back to the photograph. Quite dark up there, very dark in the corner. Maybe a little bit lighter as we come down to the bottom with the light coming in from that side window into this area. So dark at the top, burnt sienna, bit of neutral tint. And then be a bit careful with my painting around the doorway, the arch. Dark underneath the ledge. You can see with the way I'm making these brush marks, rather than long lines, just dabbing it now and again, we're trying to get in the texture of this wall as well, and continually changing these colors as I come down. Straight edge, hard edge there. Top of the fridge. Dip my brush into some water and just continue this wash down, but getting a lot lighter. Bit darker in there. And then some objects, these planks of wood or whatever they might be. On the floor. Now, it's fairly light here. And again, it's quite cool. We've got this shadow coming out from the doorway. Almost clear water in this middle bit. And we'll just strengthen up that middle part of the floor a bit more red as I come over. And then the wall itself, bit of alizarin crimson, burnt sienna. So have a bit of fun with these colours. Just need to lift off a little bit of paint around there because the light is catching a little bit of that wheel. So synthetic brush, just dampened, not too wet, just lift it off. Let's go back to the back wall, and quite dark up in that top left corner, and a little bit of blue up there. So don't know what that unit is, something to do with the power maybe. But then after that cool, we return to a bit of a warmer color. So pick up the alizarin crimson again. Quite dark, just behind the door. Again, a hard edge there. Up to the dustbin. And now a little bit of careful painting around that wheel. Just paint around the outside of it. Almost a circle, that'll do. Let's continue over to the right, a bit more alizarin crimson, a bit of burnt sienna. And we're in the far end of the room here. There's one of those hoppers and a little bit of darkness behind, lots of objects. The more you look in this area, there's lots of little things going on. So the way to deal with a complex area is maybe go a tiny bit sort of abstract and looser. Let's continue over to the right-hand side, up the wall here. So alizarin crimson. That's the top of the window opening. And then down the rest of the wall, that's the top of the archway. Down to the bottom. Now, bottom of the window, alizarin crimson, neutral tint. Quite dark at the top, but then it gets a little bit lighter towards the edge of this millstone. Now, this is another important curve here. And going around here. So let's see how we can do that. Quite dark down there, in that little corner. There. And while I've still got some dark paint in my brush, I can just be going around to areas that I've painted already and just strengthen up some of these shadows, try and make them a bit darker while the paper's still damp, should get some soft edges appearing. Okay, these are the cylinders and the millstone and this dividing wall. Let's get that in. Now that corner there is very dark, so neutral tint, alizarin crimson, a little bit of ultramarine blue as well, just so that it's not too black. It sort of comes down to this other cylinder, up to that wall here. Then this wall is a little bit lighter here, but goes a bit darker on this right-hand side. So pick up a bit of water and go along that top again. But as I go over and as I come down to the bottom, I'll pick up some darker paint, neutral tint, alizarin crimson, bit of burnt sienna. If it's not dark enough, just add in some more pigment. Down to the floor. Another important edge here, getting that curve, joining it up, making sure they sort of look consistent and all in one. And then over to the right hand edge, there's just a thin sort of slither of light we can see on the right hand side. Okay, millstone here. Red, burnt sienna, neutral tint. So just follow this. This is where the drawing becomes very important. Like that. And continue it down. Maybe there's a bit of light hitting the right-hand side, a little bit darker on the left. Quite dark again in there. This area here, now that's quite dark, this side of the hopper, so bit of my Windsor red and neutral tint should be about right. And then it comes down and there's a sort of base to this bottom of the hopper and there are a few little horizontals coming out of it. Don't know what it is, but they're maybe the tops of that cylinder. Now this, oops, too dark. This cylinder starts off fairly light on this side and it goes darker over to the side. So start off.
Tim, can you rehearse what the neutral tint is if they don't have it in their palette?
Oh, a Payne's grey will do, or maybe some kind of black. I mean, neutral tint is like a charcoalish grey colour, and it's going to darken anything else. So I use it quite a lot, but if you've got Payne's grey, that will do. Or a mixture of a dark blue, like ultramarine blue, a dark brown, like burnt umber, sort of like 40% burnt umber, 40% a dark blue, and 20, in my maths holds true, 20% alizarin crimson. And that will get close to a dark neutral tint. All right. This is too light on here. Was that all right for whoever asked that question?
That was good, thank you.
But it's quite a common one. Not everyone has heard of neutral tint, but it is very useful for getting those dramatic darks, and quickly as well when you want to work quickly with watercolor. Anything else? Right. I think that's the main darks that I wanted to get in. My next step will be sort of pulling it together with a smaller brush, my smaller synthetic brush. So are there any questions at all? Just while I'm waiting, I just need to lift off a little bit more paint on the left-hand side here. So I'm using a paper tissue and just lightly dab here. There we are, that'll do. And indeed, when I've got this, I can just be just going around in other areas. This can actually help a little bit with the texture on the walls as well.
Someone's asking why the synthetic versus the natural hairbrush.
The synthetic, it's down to I guess the springiness and the responsiveness of the brush. Sometimes you do need a brush that it's stiffer, it's more responsive. Other times you need a soft brush because you don't want to damage a layer of paint. You've laid down your wash. You're then going in with this softer brush. You don't want to lift off any of the initial layer, the layer below. So you want a softer brush. And do you see the hairs here? They bend, they don't spring up, whereas this one will spring up. So sometimes you need a stronger brush. I was doing some lifting off with this synthetic brush. Couldn't have done that very easily with a soft brush, but with a harder brush and good quality paper, you want to make sure you got good quality paper, I can do that lifting off. So lifting off could be easier with a synthetic brush. Right, I'm going to start adding in some details now. There's no more questions. So I'm picking up any color here. I'm going to start with the doorway and just make sure my fingers are relatively, there are some panels going across this doorway. Tiny bit darker on the right-hand side. There we are. Give it a doorknob as well. There's some whatnots here. A bit stronger underneath the fridge, bit of shadow. And trim across the top. There's a little bit of darkness there. And some lines on the side of that window. And I'm just looking, as I'm doing this, I'm looking at the photograph. I'm just catching up little details like these conduits, and I'll be doing the little bit of brickwork in a minute. Just sometimes where watercolor has done something, you get a little bit of a bloom or this lighter area, these two lighter areas, for example. Maybe it could be a little stone or something just on the floor there. So we're just picking up a little bit of those mistakes and enhancing them a bit to help us. And these lines now that I'm doing are going to help with the perspective and just draw the eye into the scene. There's some brickwork there. Color-wise, I'm just using anything that's in the palette. And I've got a good edge to this brush. It's not a pointy brush. It's got a bit of a flat edge to it, but I quite like it. It's one of my cheapest brushes. But you just get used to a brush, how it handles. And I think brushes aren't as important as good quality paper and good quality paints. But any brush, as long as you get used to, if you use the brush often enough, you just sort of intuitively know, I've picked up some paint. When I touch the paper, I just know what it's going to do. You just get that sense. Right, let's try and get in this floor here. Oh, the floor does go a little bit up, doesn't it? Fridge there, something behind the fridge. We don't know what it is. Top of the wall here, there's some sort of conduit going down there. There's a one coming down here. And little light things like that, I could just add a little line below it, and it could be a stick just catching the light. Or do you see what I mean? Just little objects, we can make something out of them. Continuing over. I think I need some more lines here just to, well, not too dark. These lines need to be a little bit lighter in the distance, not too, they could be darker down here, but very faint in this doorway. there we are, sort of a well-trodden pathway. And just try and make some of these lines a little bit darker where the gap is maybe deeper or wider, just a little bit darker in there. Not all of them, just giving the impression of this sort of block paling or whatever it is. Going over wheels, and then the shaft down to the floor. This one here, oops, not enough water on my brush. And then this one. On the top of the wall, there's just a few little marks and little pits and indentations. This sort of supporting shaft in the middle here. What shall I use for this? Sort of a bit of rusty old ironwork. Dark at the top. Oops, too dark. Dark at the top and comes down, then the side arm off at right angles. There, and an angle, supporting angle like that. Oops. The distant hopper. And a little bit of, it's on like a sort of platform. There's a few horizontal, very thin little horizontals in the distance. And now this middle one. And this dividing wall, some vertical supports. Bit of old brickwork showing through the top there. Not too much detail on the sides, all right? We want the main area of detail to be in this middle area here. So just be careful not to overdo it on the side there. top of the window, window frame. Bottom of the window. Okay. This millstone here, this dark hole in the middle. Could have done this with my medium mop brush, but this will do. Very dark, and then this recess has some shadow behind it. Like that, and these little marks I made with a splattering. Just strengthen those up. Right. Need to do the inside of my complicated wheel. It's a lovely wheel, that. So I need to make up some colour similar to that. See if that will do. A bit cooler. And I can see immediately this is standing out too much. So I'm going to have to tone it down a little bit in a minute. Dustbin, bit of cerulean blue. Bit of cerulean blue, and oh, it's too dark. And come down to the bottom. Some objects there in the back. So I'm just really now thinking of pulling it all together. I need to make that rim a little bit darker. It's just standing out too much. Just while that's, just want to make sure the inner parts are dry first. Can I touch up anything else? This needs to have some lines across it. Don't go for too much detail on this. Attached to the wall. And the beams on the top, shall we just strengthen those up a little bit? They're actually not too bad at the moment, but let's just add in a few more lines just to add a bit of definition to it. And there are some darker marks just coming down from those beams. Again, don't do too much detail up there. It just draws your eye up there, whereas you want to be down here. Wheels. Okay. Floor. Don't get carried away. Just we want to keep it fresh. This fridge is a little bit too light on this side, so we'll just tone it down a bit. That's better. Right. Add a few little dots in there. Just the right-hand side of where the lighter blotches are. Some random dots. This wall here, let's just give it a few horizontals just for the just to sort of inform the viewer it's some sort of wooden structure. Right, I think I'm nearly done. What I'm going to do now, just last of all, is just pick up, I just need to tone that down a bit. Is that dry? So just pick up a little bit of water on my brush and tiny bit of paint. So some parts of the wheel you can see more than others, like the top bit you can't see, and the bottom bit almost becomes invisible. Behind that dustbin. That's better. Maybe a little bit of darkness in the inside the wheel. dustbin. Right, just to pull it a little bit more together, I'm going to, actually, does that wall need to be, just need to bring a little bit of that wall there. Just going to pick up a few highlights with some white paint. So just pure white gouache or Chinese white or something similar like that. A small pointed brush, a brush with a good point, maybe dampened a little bit in clear water just to take the dryness off it. And what can we pick up? I think just a few highlights here coming from that far window. So just a tiny bit of white paint, not too much on the brush, and a few horizontals just where the light is coming in from that side. Not too much white paint, don't overdo it. There's just a little bit of light catching the underneath of that conduit as well. Maybe just a tiny bit on the floor here, just where there's some parts of the stone, just catching a bit more reflected light. Some rivets. Doing too much detail now. Rivets. That's it. I think I'm done.